So first of all, I want to apologize for getting this out later than usual. I try to be real good about doing this stuff ahead of time so it drops precisely at 7 a.m. Pacific time. But I apologize. A little life got in the way. Just leave it at that. This episode is our discussion with Corey Pein, journalist and author of Live, Work, 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 Die. It's a dark title, isn't it? It's his book. He did some... We asked in the show, like, would you call it undercover reporting? And he doesn't necessarily say it was undercover, but I would say it was a bit undercover reporting. And I enjoyed the hell out of it, out of the book. For those of you that have been listening to the show for a while, you know that I have worked in that tech environment, from the lower end. I was always a contractor of sorts, right? And I don't think I had a very desirable skill set to be hired full time. But anyway, he really explains the mentality of that environment. And some of the stories he tells about being at certain like parties is pretty goddamn hilarious, I thought. It was a fun show. We got to go kind of take deep dives into the inner workings of the mindset behind Silicon Valley, which I believe is a very libertarian one. I do agree with Corey, and there's other people. You're going to hear a little bit of it from the clip. So when you listen to these, we keep the clip in. I make an intro clip to pretty much every show. Been doing it for the last couple months now. And if you want to see these clips, that's easy. YouTube.com/This is Revolution Podcast. And you can see them. There's a playlist, show intros. See them all, like 2 to 5 minutes at the most. But in one of the clips, there's an interview with a professor emeritus out here in Berkeley that wrote another good book about Silicon Valley that also kind of talks a little bit about the libertarian mindset of, we don't need government intervention. We can fix it. The less regulation, the better off we are. And that definitely is the mantra. And there were some interesting things we talked about, because there is a section of the coding engineering world that's definitely starting to organize workplaces, which is something that I never thought I'd see in my lifetime, because it definitely has a feel of like you're in an office with 1,000 wannabe billionaires. So the fact that they kind of understood their place as workers and wanted to get to organize and get some rights. I think Google started a union in one of their shops. That's interesting. We touch on that a little bit. We definitely touch on the housing question. Corey was here in the Bay Area, so he had a great look at how this tech sector negatively affects housing. Which is crazy, because it's not like all these cats live alone. A lot have roommates. They have to, because rent's so high. But thank you for taking the time to listen. please share this wherever you're listening. I saw some of the listening numbers. I don't really look at the listener stats too much, but shocked to know that we are ranked last I checked, we were ranked number 57 on iTunes for music podcast. Technically, this is still a music show. Gotta get in there and change that category. But yeah, 57. We were ranked above Pharrell. Take that. If you like what you're hearing and you have the means, you'd like to help the show grow, become a patron. We have patron-only programming. You definitely get the shows first. Patreon.com/BitterLakePresents. Also, wherever you're listening to this, there's links in the description to get This is Revolution merchandise. And again, want to watch the shows live, participate. It is a lot of fun. YouTube.com/This is REVOLUTIONpodcast. And we are also on Twitch. Twitch.tv/This is REVOLUTIONpodcast. So on that note, I hear my cue. Please enjoy this episode with author and journalist Corey Pein. There's also links in the description wherever you're listening to the show to buy Corey's book, Live, Work, 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 Die. And I am out. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of This is Revolution Podcast. And let me bring in my co-host, my homie, my dog, right away. Mr. Pascal Robert.
Peace and greetings to the chat. Peace and greetings to the audience. Peace and greetings, Jason Miles, with the yellow microphone.
Yes. As the show is growing, I was able to afford some 25-cent pop screens for the microphone. So now I can have a pop screen at both computer setups, so I don't have to keep forgetting the microphone pop screen as I do the edits for the video. So there you go. And I'll have a different color for every show. Take that. That's moving on. That's what progress looks like.
It's fantabulous.
I don't have a hat on. And coming all the way live from the great state of Missouri, he's a professor
He's a friend of the show. He, like my co-host, has just been all over the podcast sphere, gallivanting. That's what Pascal and this gentleman do. Mean Gene Bajlan.
Greetings, everybody. Greetings, Jason. Greetings, Pascal. It is a pleasure to be here this evening, and I'm super excited for our guest.
Gene Bajlan.
I'm excited too, because I worked not as hardcore, but I definitely was in that world probably more than I wanted to be. And reading that book was a lot of that is so true. Especially when he talked about sleep pods. Sleep pods was my favorite. I wish you would have went to a few other places, because some of the offices I went to had music rooms. And we'll get into that. We'll get into that in a little bit. Before we bring in our guest, let's play the intro video.
Since Wall Street started using computers, volume on the big board doubled and redoubled to as much as 70 million shares a day. The government certainly uses computers. When you pay your taxes, IRS computers will audit the returns. The federal government also uses computers to track down runaway husbands on welfare. And now the Reagan administration wants to cut down the number of welfare cheats by putting a computer cross-check on everyone who gets government help. That's going too far, says the American Civil Liberties Union. But for the most part, computers have become such a way of life that many people believe they don't invade their privacy. That's because in America today, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is inevitably linked to a computer.
Though there was much sheer rascality in the Wall Street of the 1920s, much sheer greed roaming at large, and a widespread betrayal of the fiduciary principle, it may be that none of these things did as much damage to the country in the sum total as the sheer irresponsibility of men who, possessing vast powers, played the game of profit and loss without regard for the general public interest. This quote from Frederick Lewis Allen's 1935 book, Lords of Creation, are prescient words that still ring true when we speak of the new oligarchical elite in Silicon Valley, running roughshod over regulations and labor rights like their turn-of-the-century predecessors. Is the Silicon Valley Tech 1% truly the benevolent creators of technology that will lead us to a new, better, smarter, more efficient world? Or is their libertarian vision of progress just a dystopian nightmare? We'll discuss this and more. This is Revolution.
Well, Americans have always celebrated their capitalist heroes, and that started with the Industrial Revolution, the early factories of Lowell and so on.
Where you had, like here, writers and artists going. It was with the same kind of utopian vision of how this was going to recreate an egalitarian and wonderful world.
Yeah, think of the railroad, think of Edison, think of Henry Ford and the automobile industry. We've done this over and over, and it includes not only the celebration of the technology, because Americans, more than any other people, just adore any new technology. We also adore the kind of great successful capitalists. We lionize them. You think of Year of Our Ford in Brave New World. And we did the same thing with Steve Jobs, for example, recently. And then we add that kind of utopian element that this is going to save the world, this is going to change the world for the better. We are the ultimate modernist, looking to the future and not paying too much attention to the present and the problems of the present.
Dual ability that man has. And I think that after this process has come to maturity, the effects that it's going to have on society are actually going to far outstrip even those that the petrochemical revolution has had.
But these computers are not necessarily simply innocent playthings of the future. Some people feel threatened by them. Some think they tend to dehumanize, and others fear they may eventually take over their jobs.
So, without any further ado, I'm sure you guys are all excited. An older episode of this gentleman of the Michael Brooks Show was on earlier today, coincidentally enough. Mr. Corey Pein.
Hey, guys.
journalist extraordinaire, author. There's a lot of things you do. Authoring,
that's most of it.
you do well. Look, you wrote a book called was it Live, Work, Work, Die?
One extra word: live, work, 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 die.
Oh, there's 3 works. Yeah. There is a lot of work in what these cats do. In you actually went, would you say undercover?
You know, I get that a lot. I would not say undercover. I told everybody that I was, when I was doing my reporting in Silicon Valley, that I was working on a book, but I also told them I was doing a startup. So they would kind of be more, nobody was really interested in the book or anything that I wrote. So, you know, they just figured that it wasn't that interesting because you had to read it. I didn't find a lot of readers in my reporting, you know.
There isn't a lot of readers in that world, right? Can you give it to me quick?
Exactly.
The elevator pitch.
So a book is just something that's kind of out of their universe in a way.
That's for my barista to do.
Or something you put on your shelf to look like you've got interests, you know.
As much as we joke about that in this podcast world, there's people that always do their show behind this wall of books that they allegedly read. That is definitely a world with a bunch of books that you know people haven't read, but they have around. Rand is one of them because Thiel is such a big presence in that world. I think that's kind of funny.
Corey, I wanted to ask you a question, not only about your book, but about your research going stealth in Silicon Valley. In the recent election period that we had in November 2020, we saw a lot of discussion about the tech world becoming agents of censorship with the way they were handling political discourse, particularly around Donald Trump, and how people accused them of ideologically picking favorites in terms of the way in which they were handling media. You saw a lot of people on the right-wing side of the political aisle talking about how the IT world were in bed with the Democrats and the liberals and so on. Based on your experience and based on your book as well, how would you describe the politics of the tech magnates, if you will? What is their worldview? Some people have accused them of being really libertarians on many issues. How would you describe the way in which they actually view the world, politics, and governance as an industry, if a statement can be made overall?
Well, I think they run on a spectrum really at the top of the industry, from libertarian Democrats on the left side to outright fascists on the right, usually with a futuristic sort of bent like the fascists of the 1920s. Very, very easy to trace a lineage there. I don't think there are a lot of, or any, despite what the Republicans in the U.S. say, I don't think there are really any left-wing tech CEOs out there. It's just not something that that is a feature. You know, many of them have what you might call left-wing social views. You know, they're pro gay marriage and pro drug legalization and things like that. They might even support redistributive programs like a universal basic income. But I think you'll find that a lot of those leftish positions that tech executives have are really libertarian positions at the end of the day. And even if they support Democrats electorally, they tend to be libertarian in outlook.
Now, when you say they have fascist possibilities similar to the 1920s, do you mean almost kind of like fascist to the point of like anti-Semitic or anti-certain ethnic groups? How would you relate them?
No, that's a good question, because very rarely do you see overt, obvious racism or bigotry of that nature among the tech fascists. They tend to hedge things in terms of scientific racism. So, you know, they'd be believers in, you know, racial disparities in intelligence and things like that.
Heavy on IQ and heavy on eugenics.
Yeah, big into eugenics. I mean, there's a lot of admirers of, I guess, the Chinese approach. Some of them think that the Chinese are biologically superior white people, and that they're incipient eugenics programs, genetic engineering type programs that are happening in China are something that need to be emulated in the U.S. So, do they come out and wave their, fascist flags and stuff as, business executives in Silicon Valley? No, but they've certainly created an environment for that kind of street fascism to thrive, through their sort of libertarian idea of free speech and, letting their sort of algorithmic selection of speech so that, suddenly 20 years ago, I don't think Holocaust denial, for example, was quite where it's at today, but today you can find it on the first page of Google results. And that's not an accident. These things, the libertarian outlook sort of creates a space for the fascism at a lower level. And at the higher level, I do think there are outright fascists, but they're a bit, Peter Thiel is somebody I would consider.
Whoa. That was my cat.
Oh, your cat knocked over your computer?
My cat just went nuts, yeah.
He likes to... Is my mic still working and everything?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, that's good. Peter Thiel, the Facebook board member, PayPal founder, now venture capitalist, is somebody who I'm pretty comfortable calling a fascist. But he certainly wouldn't identify that way. He would call himself a libertarian or a reactionary. He's described himself as.
You talk about Peter Thiel in the book, specifically in the second half of the book. Could you elaborate for our audience a little bit about the kind of networks that Peter Thiel is involved in funding and sort of how things relate to him in terms of his sort of attempt to engage in the political process?
Thiel, he would say that he gives to a variety of causes, and that's true. But also for years, he's been maybe the most important funder of a faction of the alt-right that they called neo-reactionaries. And an example, he's been a patron of a number of characters I describe in my book. One is a guy named Curtis Yarvin, who goes by the online pseudonym Mencius Moldbug, who had a blog that was became pretty popular in Silicon Valley and beyond it, where he praised or at least condoned some of the activities of people like Anders Breivik, the Oslo mass murderer, neo-Nazi, and gave a lot of long-winded, sort of pseudo-scholarly defenses of scientific racism, and promoted an idea of that Peter Thiel is quite fond of, called I forget the exact phrasing, but the idea is that you'd have instead of a United States, you'd have 1,000 different corporate states, basically corporate fiefdoms, where people would be free to move between. So if you didn't like living in Microsoft land, you could go live in Facebook land or what have you. That's kind of the neo-reactionary ideology. But also he funded people who trended into outright fascism but sort of from the transhumanist point of view. I don't know if you're familiar with transhumanism, but it's an idea that what's that?
Where we become cyborgs.
Yeah, basically the idea is that we're merging with machines and we're on the cusp of some kind of evolutionary transition into a cybernetic future. That's an idea that animates a lot of tech CEOs.
Isn't that why that movie Ex Machina was it was almost like porn for a certain class of people in Silicon Valley? If you remember that film from 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah,
that's sort of like, I didn't see that movie, but because I kind of got the idea that it was a little bit promoting that idea rather than being critical of it. Although,
Elon Musk is big on this stuff. The whole connecting the human brain to some kind of like a computerized digital, chips or something of that nature.
Yeah, I get into that in the book. they're all kind of believers in this thing called the singularity, which is similar. It's this idea that we're merging with computers, and eventually the computers will eclipse us and will take over the universe as some kind of digital consciousness. It's pretty far out stuff. I think it's quite far-fetched and not likely to happen, but I think it's pretty telling that the tech CEOs, some of the billionaire oligarchs that are running our world are really enraptured by these ideas, out of science fiction, really, that they find, if not immediately feasible, something they want to build toward. And so if you interrogate like what kind of society we would have in those scenarios, that's where the fascism sort of emerges, because it's usually a tech oligarch calling all the shots, and not really a sort of democratic or pluralistic society that we might want to build.
So what you're saying is that these tech oligarchs present a type of fascism that's even distinct from the kind of banality of the traditional right-wing Trumpian manifestation that we see everyone worried about right now.
I think it is distinct. I mean, you saw Peter Thiel supporting Trump. He was one of the most important, he spoke on his behalf at the Republican National Convention back in 2016. There were some reports that he kind of soured on Trump later, but I mean, they do align on a lot of important issues. I mean, I think the racism is one. The business above all is another. The idea that corporations should really be calling the shots. I think
Pledge of Allegiance in that world too. The business above all almost feels like a Pledge of Allegiance. I said in that world.
Yeah, absolutely. But there's other things that they're not really comfortable with. The sort of more Trumpian fascist movement in the country. They're not really comfortable with some of the social aspects of it, I guess. So I think you would have to consider it distinct, but they do work together. And ultimately, I think the techie fascist tendency is a bit scarier because it tricks a lot more people into thinking it's more benign.
Well, it's almost as if that they've like seen Blade Runner, or they've read some of the classics of cyberpunk, but instead of seeing it as a dystopia, they see it as a blueprint for the future. They've like inverted what we used to think of as in the past as kind of like a terrifying dystopian future, and are trying to present it as something positive almost.
Well, didn't Peter Thiel say in an interview, and I remember Megan Day wrote about this a while back, that his take on Star Wars, that it was a pro-capitalism movie, all because of the character of Han Solo.
I was going to bring that up. I mean, they love to argue about science fiction and stuff, and Thiel is definitely a Star Wars person, not a Star Trek person. He thinks Star Trek is socialist propaganda. I mean, I guess you could make that case, but it's a little more colonial than socialist in a lot of ways. But anyway, yeah, they actually embrace a lot of the villains, the classic villains of science fiction, and I think they're worth emulating.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. No, you were what?
Oh, we watched Blade Runner on Netflix last night, and it had been a long time since I saw it. And one of the villain is like this corporate overlord on Mars, and I thought this is like exactly what Elon Musk wants to be.
He won't watch, like those guys won't watch Blade Runner though. That's what's so funny. Like I got to be in a room. There was a Facebook conference that was for marketing only, but they don't advertise it as a Facebook conference. And I got to work at one of those dumbass jobs I was telling you about, and I got to be in a room where I had to sign a non-disclosure and listen to Peter Thiel talk and captivate an entire pretty big conference room or convention room full of aspiring sales
bootlickers.
Bootlickers, yeah.
Aspiring bootlickers. But that actually is what I wanted to ask. Is like, how far does this ideology run down? Like, what kind of buy-in is there, Corey, for this kind of techno hell utopia ideology? Do people in the business just go along with it? Is there, like, amongst the proles, amongst the kind of programmers, I would assume there's more ideological diversity, but obviously how hegemonic is this ideology?
I think it's really strong among people who see themselves as entrepreneurs and want to be, you know, their own CEO of their own startup, founder of their own startup, and emulate the oligarchs. Less so among the rank and file. You know, since I wrote and published the book, there's been like a lot of labor organizing in the tech sector, which to an extent that I might have thought impossible when I started my reporting. And I think it's been great to see that. So I think the ideology is it has a lot of buy-in. You know, I would say, if I had to estimate, I would say probably half of the people that work in tech are on some level bought into if not the tech fascist ideology, the adjacents of it and some of the prerequisites of it. You know, and they're definitely okay with the idea of corporations running things, for instance.
You don't think that's a conservative estimate?
Well, I just saw the reason I said 50% is I just saw a poll the other day that was like something like, I think it was 50% of tech workers, maybe more, were interested in joining a union, which indicates to me some skepticism about the package of ideologies that their employers are kind of selling them, you know? So
have you had a response from people working in the tech sector who've read your book? You know?
Yeah. Most of them find a lot familiar anecdotes and things like that in what I put in. I don't hear from a lot of people that work in tech and hated the book, but I do hear from a lot of people that it resonated with.
Is there a strong sense of we've got an app for that attitude towards overall large problems? I find that consistently when I interface with people who work in like the IT world at executive level, that they have this really like kind of condescending, like, oh, well, we can just develop an app for that kind of worldview for like any and every type of problem.
Yeah, it's really frustrating. It's really frustrating because, I mean, that's something that even the people who are maybe pro-union or more left-wing in their outlook, who work in tech, often tend to buy into, is the idea that they can innovate their way out of problems. And I just don't think that everything's solvable that way. I think that's pretty common in that industry for sure.
But would you agree it's even deeper than we've got an app for that? I would even add on to the fact it's like, well, if I create this thing and make my gajillions of dollars, then I can give money to said charity or start said foundation, and then I'll change the world. Anand Girdadas writes a lot about it in his book, Winner Take All. I don't know if you read or enjoyed that book, but there were definitely aspects of it that I really did kind of agree with, because again, being in that room with people like Peter Thiel for 2 days straight, and you hear the way they talk, it is like, you know, once you get your nest egg of your first billion, then you can go into your philanthropic Bill Gates like efforts, because to a lot of these people, they don't see the bad of Bill Gates. All they know about Bill and Melinda Gates is that he wants to cure malaria.
Yeah, I think it's even deeper. I think it's something that's like very American in a way. The idea that, you know, you can get yours and then solve the problem through innovation or through wealth, you know, and in some ways, Silicon Valley, I think, is like the new. So it sounds a little cliche, but it's, you know, the new frontier of American capitalism. You know, so you see a lot of older sort of value sets and assumptions about how things work sort of reinterpreted through the tech industry.
Do you think that do you think that there's any kind of room for any kind of oppositional or left politics in this space? Are they so subsumed with the hegemony of corporate power and of capital that the notion of having a public goods governance or even wealth redistribution is just absolutely anathema to anything they consider?
I think if there is hope for that, it'll come from the kind of worker organizing that's been happening at the big tech companies. It'll come from the bottom, in other words, because I don't think the boardrooms and the executive suites are really interested in fundamentally changing the way that they operate, which is what you need to see happen if tech were to be, if I think even beyond that, I mean, I think the way that we think about tech now in our society is from a completely corporate-centered capitalist viewpoint, and we need to think about it as more of a tool that we can choose how to use as a society, rather than having these companies constantly rolling out new products, new innovations, and new labor abuses in the guise of apps and gig work opportunities and things like that are just foisted on us. I don't know if that answers your question, but
one of the things that really comes across in your book, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like for a lot of Silicon Valley startups, they're either fraud, like out and out fraud, or they are premised on illegality. To what extent, and that sort of speaks to a kind of broader point that, you know, a lot of people talk about innovation in Silicon Valley, but how much innovation is going on, and how much is, it strikes me, Silicon Valley is sucking up the sort of intellectual capacity of the United States, you know, people who could be doing very important technical projects and wasting their talents on making a dating app for, you know, people with dogs, or you know, like basically driving people into what is in a sense either criminality, something that is entirely you know, useless, or but might make a short profit, or is just fraud and is wasting them. It's actually stifling innovation.
I think 100% the latter of what you're saying. I mean, it is crushing innovation. These companies, I mean, start with how especially the largest companies behave and treat actual innovative products. They tend to acquire the smaller companies that innovate and then shut them down, or, you know, absorb them and then shut them down. That's so common. It's been happening, you know, since the 90s, if not earlier, with Microsoft, now Google, Facebook. A huge part of the only way they can grow now in many ways is to acquire smaller companies. And usually I've been through this myself at a job I had, where, you know, if a smaller company innovates in some way and poses a threat to the larger company, they acquire it and basically make it disappear. So that's, for all they talk about innovation, I mean, that's just a standard practice of the industry, which goes against even their own conception of what's innovative. As far as like the real groundbreaking kind of technologies and things that, you know, you might like to see more of in our society, or even consumer products like the iPhone, all that stuff is government research backed. I mean, sometimes the research goes back 2 or 3 decades before it reaches the consumer market, but the biggest innovations still to this day come from government funded research. The public university systems, the national laboratories, military research is a huge one, and Silicon Valley is really tight with the military industrial complex, or part of it, I should say. So, you know, there's a lot of myths that the tech industry is promoted about innovation and what makes it happen. But the reality is it's government research, it's government money that drives the big innovation. And, you know, I think we need to really get our acts together as far as how we allow that to be used. It's been the government's practice and priority for many decades now that once, you know, government research has reached maturity, then it goes to the private sector so people can make a profit on it. And that has basically created the Silicon Valley we see today, which is totally predatory, capitalist in nature. Well, and the benefits aren't shared widely. So
I wanted to ask you about that. So a lot of times when these things are rolled out, right? Like one thing about that world, and I haven't finished your book, and maybe you do talk about this in your book, and I apologize for not finishing your book in 2 days.
That's okay. I'm not offended. Don't worry.
The first thing I noticed when I walked into, when I was like, finally, I got a badge. You know how it is when you get a badge, like you're a guy that can go in and out of the building without someone escorting you in and out of a building. Was that there was such a disconnect with people that did work that we always hear this almost Horatio Alger-esque story of starting from the ground up, right? And one day you'll get the corner office. And that seems to be kind of done in this new world. Like how many people really move up? And there's a huge, like the people that serve your food are a third party. The people that handle your mail are a third party. Sometimes even the programmers that you're dealing with, depending on what they're doing, are a third party. The security is a third party. Like there's a small handful of people that are actually employed by said company. And then there's all these third parties, all these people that will never move up. And I feel like the third party people are all vying for that spot to move up. So when you talk about like predatory capitalism, it's like people don't even give a damn that the people that are serving their food, cleaning the building, protecting said building, i.e. security, are all extremely underpaid third-party personnel.
I did see, I mean, I think generally speaking, you're absolutely right. I did see when there was an organizing campaign recently at Google or somewhere like that, the tech workers who are organizing made a point to speak up for the third-party contractors who are being mistreated at the same company. So I think that there might be a growing awareness of that, but there is still kind of this caste system in the industry, and outsourcing, if it saves them money, they'll do it. So,
Jesus, yes. Did you have something you wanted to follow up, Gene?
No, I was just going to ask. You've kind of like hinted to some of the changes that have taken place in particular in terms of organizing. Could you maybe elaborate a little bit more on what you think might have changed in the tech world, either internally or in the way that it's perceived by outsiders, since you completed your book? Because it seems like you were writing at kind of the tail end of the golden age to a certain degree.
I think that's right.
So yeah, I kind of wanted to get your take on how things have progressed since you completed your book.
I'm not sure what was the tipping point or what prompted the change. I think that, one thing I do talk about in the book that really surprised me is how miserable people were, even the ones with these good jobs, with, where there were catered lunches and dinners and all the benefits of working for a big tech company. Like, they tended to be pretty miserable. And I think that it was prompted by discussions that tech workers were having with each other about not working on products that had any social value, working on those dating apps or whatever, and just feeling like, is this what my life is about? And also people who worked in that industry, if they worked for maybe not one of the larger companies, but for startups, after a couple of times when your startup takes off and the workers don't get, even if they've got stock options or whatever, they don't strike it rich like the founders did. That only has to happen so many times until people are like, hey, what's actually going on here? So I think it was just maybe the way that they'd been abused by the industry that drove the new trend in organizing, because I think a lot of the golden era that you're talking about, when the money was just flowing freely for anybody with an idea, did not last forever. And I think the workers just kind of got fed up.
It does sound like a rather soul-destroying business. Another question I had was, to what extent was Silicon Valley ever meritocratic, at least in terms of people with technical abilities? And to what extent was it the same sons and daughters of like American elites who were reaping all the benefits? To what extent was it just the younger generation of the American bourgeoisie who had money were going in with these startups, and the myth of these programmers striking it rich was really not what was happening?
I think it's about as meritocratic as Stanford's admission policy at any given time. So if you know what's going on that score, then you could say how you could maybe quantify it. But just based on my own reporting, and because I really wanted to know the answer to this too, but based on my own reporting, I mean, the people that get their startups funded or get the top jobs, I mean, they're by and large, pretty well off white kids from wealthy suburbs, if not like right in if not Palo Alto, then someplace like that around the country. And there is a bit of meritocratic selection. I mean, you do hear about what was that company? I forget what the most recent one was. It was some amazing IPO where made a couple of billionaires overnight, and they were nobody's from nowhere, and that does happen, but it's the exception that proves the rule. And the rule is it's not any. I don't think it's any more meritocratic than other big businesses in America. Certainly not in terms of upward mobility within the companies. Like there's that caste system that Jason was talking about with third-party contractors and stuff, and people who, toil away at the same jobs and never really hope to move up. I mean, there's that going on within companies. And then when you look at the venture capital level, like they don't take chances on people with, boring state college diplomas and things like that.
Sure. That's pretty gloomy and depressing.
Another gloomy, depressing thing that you talk about is, and you mildly hear it today, not as much as you did before, was the learn how to code, and how coding has become not what people thought it was going to be, as far as like this forever job that you could always get. These kids are poor. There's no way out. Well, fucking teach bitches how to code.
I mean, part of the reason I wrote the book is I was really kind of a believer in that, because I was newspaper journalist for most of my career, and at a certain point, after the third or fourth newspaper shuts down, you start thinking like, is this going to work when I'm middle-aged, And I was good with computers, and I, enjoyed building websites and things like that. So I thought that I could make that transition, Certainly the people I knew that were working in tech compared to my newspaper friends were like making more money. They seemed to be happier in general, like less gripes. And I thought maybe I can make this work. But, the first time I got a real tech job, I started to see that it wasn't everything that it was, sold as. And as far as learning to code, you really have to think about why are they promoting that so hard? Like, what's with all these coding boot camps and like teaching everybody in every school in the country how to code? They're trying to lower their labor costs. I mean, that first and foremost, that's what that campaign is about. They don't want to pay programmers $200,000 a year. They want to pay them $35,000 or $40,000 a year if they can get away with it. And there's nothing that is that rarefied or difficult about coding that most people can't learn it. So, if they really were to incorporate it in, say, K through 12 curriculum, then I think, that they've gone a long way toward reaching that goal of having cheap, disposable programmers. I mean, eventually they want to automate the programming itself. GitHub just released this company that hosts a lot of software code, open source code. They just released a new sort of AI tool that if you're typing programming, it'll like finish your code block for you. At least
make it easy.
Yeah, to make it easy. And they scanned, their whole library of code to sort of build this database that powers the coding assistant. That's the kind of thing that the industry beyond learn to code is trying to promote, because again, they want to lower their labor costs.
That's always, whenever I hear people, whenever I hear politicians talking about like, we need more people in this industry and more people in that industry, when they're like, we need more people training as plumbers, I'm always like, that's because you had to pay like a plumber a load of money to come and fix your toilet in the middle of the night, and you want to pay less. You want more people doing these jobs. I think a lot of people miss this when we talk about the skilling up agenda, because it's very often when it's pushed by business, it's about lowering the wages by increasing, more engineers, cheaper engineers.
Right.
And that's something that people miss a lot. But I kind of wanted to kind of ask something else, which is about it comes off something that we were talking about last week on our show when we were talking about people checking out of work and getting out of the rat race and this lying down phenomena. And one of the things that came up was one of the differences between China and the United States is that although by no means hegemonic, China has some kind of national development mission that there is a significant degree of buy-in to. There's like, you can kind of have a purpose in China or believe you have some kind of purpose in this big national development project. Whereas in the United States, that notion of some kind of collective national project is sort of absent. America does not seem to have anything beyond glorifying getting rich. In what sense do these companies, the Googles, the Facebooks, to what extent do they sort of almost build a kind of like national project, like a company nationalism and a kind of national project idea, but for the employees of that company? And to what extent does the fact that these companies have some kind of ideological mission, however superficial and fake it is, make them attractive?
I think, you see in Silicon Valley, pretty much every single company, whether it's a startup or a big company, pretends that it's got some grand mission. I mean, Facebook talks about how, we're on a mission to connect the world and shit like that. And, how a lot of it is more concrete or more maybe believable or interesting than that kind of pap. However, they've all got to do it. And I think it goes, to a, I don't know, it's some kind of psychological phenomenon of people who work in that industry where they want to feel like they're the good capitalists. They're better than Wall Street. They're not like those people back east who just are interested in making money. They're cool Californians who really want to make the world a better place. And that's all you hear. We're going to change the world. We're going to make the world a better place. Blah, 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 blah. And they all say it. It's like
with TikTok.
TikTok's a Chinese company.
Chinese. With a similar kind of app. They're going to make the world a better place.
Yeah. I get you.
Like Grindr make the world a better place with all their money. Actually, what is? Have you ever met some of the people who work for these like Tinder, Grindr, those kind of things? I mean, do they believe that they're making? Because I gotta respect.
I just saw on Twitter. I saw an ad for a workshop, and no offense to anybody that might be participating in this or whatever, but it was OnlyFans, and they were doing a panel on sex work and how to be like, how to incorporate in your life and be have a healthy sort of outlook or whatever. It was like, it was not Grindr, but I think it sort of speaks to your point, or to my point, where they all do it. So I think even if you went to like, I'm trying to think of one, maybe, no, even like Bitcoin, right? Like people who are into Bitcoin and those kind of startups around Bitcoin, like even if they're just in it for making money, they also talk about changing the world and making it a better place. They talk about, like that Spike Lee ad, right?
Oh my God.
Look, changing the world is built into your business plan in this world that we're speaking about, because these are the people that have been put on the pedestal as the world changers. So when we think about the late Steve Jobs, whatever anyone that's watching this show thinks about him, let's be honest, that iPhone, even though a lot of us, again, watching this show know the history of the technology behind the iPhone being government funded, being pitched around for years, no one wanted to touch it. The capitalists come in and say, yeah, the government funded that, but if it wasn't for us, you wouldn't have the marketing that put that technology in your phone. And we, therefore, have made the world a better place. Look, you can take pictures in low light.
Still waiting for a really good light sensor.
You can take pictures for your OnlyFans site with your iPhone. It's amazing. Synergy. It's synergy. To what extent do you think that culture? Because that culture sounds pretty toxic, especially if you have to like pretend that you believe in the mission of like, you know, like I believe in OnlyFans because I believe, you know, everybody should be able to engage in sex work, whoever they are, and we're connecting people around the world. To what extent do you think that culture is infecting other areas of the economy where, like, now if you want to go work at freaking Walmart, you have to give them a whole song and dance about, like, I'm really enthusiastic about working at Walmart and delivering people, you know, like, you can't just go to a job anymore and say, like, I would like a job because I like eating and I want to be left alone.
Is that why Walmart didn't hire me when I went and applied there many moons ago?
I mean, I don't know where you can get a job and just be like, yeah, I want this job because it's got like discrete hours. You know, I don't have to take it home with me and I don't have to think about it when I'm not at work. I mean, it seems like it's infected everything.
Yeah, don't say that. Like, it's so funny. I was actually talking to my girl about an intern, a very, very enthusiastic intern she has at her job. And we were joking. She goes, the poor person hasn't been tainted yet from she's like, I can work long hours and I can do this and I can do that. When I would work with what I did, Corey, was I went out with a bunch of marketing people from one of the companies, and we would go work these music festivals. And you know the type. At the airport, their laptops in their lap. On the plane, their laptops in their lap. Waiting for the Uber to pick us up to go to the Airbnb, their laptops in their lap. Like, they're constantly working. And that is so a part of the culture that if you're not working, then you're just not worth it. And they weren't making as much money as I thought they were making, considering the hours these people were putting in.
I mean, it's so, I guess, like in the intro video there, I don't know what year it was from. It looked like it was from like 1988 or something, but the news guy was like, he was like going to sit down next to the computer. He's like, and some people worry that these things are going to take over our lives and maybe take our jobs. And it's like, yeah, absolutely right. I mean, eventually they do want to take all our jobs. Mm-hmm. That is part of the Silicon Valley agenda, if you can say there's such a thing. But in the meantime, they've totally taken over our lives. Like, who can get away from email, you know, social media, like that stuff, like the line between work and not work has pretty much been obliterated. If you're in any,
that was the best advice I got from Peter Thiel, was that he hated email.
Well, he's at a level he doesn't need to deal with it. He doesn't need to look at these things.
He said some of the most time-wasting things you will ever have is responding to an email. And he said that phone calls work great and they're more efficient.
See, I'm thinking smart because that's what I do. I don't when I have to advise students, I tell them to speak to me on the phone because I'm not doing it by email because it takes ages.
Because this is what he said. This is what I now talking to Corey is making me remember this fucking whole thing.
Wait. What about your non-disclosure agreement?
Fuck them. What are they going to do? Sue a broke man? Have fun with that shit. Blood from a turnip, Zuckerberg. I remember him saying the reason why he didn't like email was that there is this thing that people get nervous when they write the initial email. So you get a lot of, hey, I want to ask you a question. Then he's got to respond, well, what's the fucking question? Then they ask the question, then he's got to, you know, he didn't like that back and forth, and he felt that with a phone call, you kind of get it all out.
Well, there you go. Life lessons from Peter Thiel.
Life lessons. he was very.
That's what he. Well, the best one when I worked for Games Workshop, they had the best system of dealing with their employees. Right, you would get paid, right, but you would get a 50% discount on everything in the shop, and you could get toy soldier miniatures at cost. So everybody who worked for Games Workshop, and one of the preconditions for working from Games Workshop is that you had to collect Games Workshop tabletop miniatures. So what happened? All the employees just ended up spending all their salary back at Games Workshop. So they really got you with the ideological mission. That kind of feels like what Silicon Valley is. You know, everybody's like, everything is like going round in a big circle into, and people are just getting squeezed for everything they have.
They're reinventing company stores for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And they feed you so you never leave.
No.
I'm pretty sure that Amazon eventually is going to try to make their own currencies like Bitcoin or something, so that they'll give you enough that you can spend it there at the store.
My God. Yeah.
As we're wrapping up this first hour, I do want to ask this to Corey, and I'm surprised that Brother Pascal hasn't brought this up. Yeah, I'm looking at you. There was a story that came out of a small independent Nevada newspaper that there were tech companies trying to move into some of the vast nothing that is Nevada and create kind of company towns, have their own school system, have their own currency, have their own police force. Did you see that story at all when it hit?
I think I saw that, but I didn't quite dig into it. So if you know more about it, I'd be curious. I'm not surprised. I mean, there are efforts. Some of the more extreme sort of tech libertarians have tried to build similar things in South America, and on the sea. That's another example. Peter Thiel has funded something called the Seasteading Institute, which they made fun of on the Silicon Valley show, where they had a platform out at sea that was supposedly lawless and all the rules written by the corporation. That's the kind of idea that really gets their juices going, you know? So I won't be surprised if some jurisdictions actually let that happen. It's already happening. Like, I wanted to do a story. It got nixed, unfortunately. But when I was living in India, I wanted to do a story because there are private cities being established there. And I think that precedent will be used to do the same thing in the US, for instance, because people have absorbed this idea that the government can't do anything right and companies are more efficient. So why not let the company hire the police force and deal with the sewers and stuff? It just usually, yeah, basically. But that goes back to what we were saying about how, these Silicon Valley leaders look at science fiction and see themselves as the villains and think it's desirable.
It is really perverse in the sense that so much of what was envisaged as a dystopia in the past is now being flipped around and turned into and repackaged as the new utopia. But you scratch beneath the surface and it is like, it's as LME said, it's neo-feudalism. I mean, that's what it comes down to. I mean, they're even appointing their own court political scientists and spokesmen to articulate an ideology for this new order.
You combine that with the fact that, as Corey says, a lot of them are literally fascists. And what are we really talking about here?
Yeah, I think it's pretty scary. I mean, I try not to think about it as much as when I was working on the book because it does bum me out. And that is one piece of feedback I did hear a lot, is people said they found it depressing. But I tried to make it funny so that the depressing parts would go down a little smoother.
It was hilarious. And Pascal, you're talking about fascism with the Black Lives Matter sticker on it. It's rainbow colored. So
rainbow colored BLM fascism.
I don't
BLM boot.
If someone can make a name for that.
The BLM boot. Yeah.
Yeah, it's rainbow colored BLM fascism for the new millennium. For the new generation. That's what it is.
Woke fascism.
Woke fascism.
For woke fascism, dude. If you're not hip with woke fascism, then what are you even doing, man?
He's not doing it right.
Jeez. Corey, you just bummed us all out.
Yeah, sorry, I have that effect. I have that effect.
No, we appreciate it.
I think this shit is fucking hilarious. Again, being in that world, and there's wherever you're listening or watching the show, there's links in the description to Corey's website as well as buy links to Corey's book.
Yeah, buy Corey's book, honestly. And there's a book version. I've read the book version. I've also listened to the listening version, which has Corey reading it to you.
Oh, you're reading it?
Yeah, I did the whole thing. It took like 3 days in a little booth to read the book. But is it because you found out that the guy that usually reads it is a prisoner, is locked up? Is that why? No, nothing so socially conscious. It's because I got paid a little extra.
Nice.
But because of the way publishing works, I never actually saw that money. It's just taken out of my advance. What I owe the publisher. So
I didn't know.
Surely it's not as well. Everybody should buy Corey's book because it's really worth it. And surely it can't be as bad as academic publishing, where like you write a book and you never see any money for it. You must.
I mean, the book did not sell well enough that I'm getting royalty checks, but I did get a decent amount of money when I signed. So, but it was better than academic publishing. My wife is having her first book come out on an academic press pretty soon, and I don't think it's going to change our lives financially speaking.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, thank you so much, Corey. You'll be joining us for the second half.
Yeah, sure.
I believe.
We can tell the second half. I want to get more into Corey's time in India and actually Bill Gates, his role in India and what's going on there. And we'll tell more hilariously funny horror stories of free lunches, micro kitchens, espresso machines on every floor. What else?
OnlyFans.
OnlyFans. You get free. I wonder what the bonuses are if you work at OnlyFans.
A hoodie that says OnlyFans on it, so you can walk around and people go, "Oh shit, you work at OnlyFans?" You go, "Yeah, that's what you do."
Yeah, I suppose so. Well, everybody should remember to like and subscribe.
Subscribe, hit the bell, become a patron if you like. Tell your friends about the podcast.
So for those of you that are not patrons, we will be hosting the patron-only half on Facebook. So if you go to the This Is Revolution Facebook page, there is an invite. We are charging admission for it.
But not for patrons.
No, of course not. For patrons, just go to the Patreon. The link's up.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay.
We're still having some weird technical issues. So while we're having these weird technical issues, I figured, well, let me try to open it up to more people that don't want to pay every month, but just want to talk shit with us for the next 30 minutes to an hour. So if that's the case, go to Facebook. There's an event up there. Sign up, and you can get in the room with us while we talk some shit.
And also, we have hats, don't we? Even though these guys don't have
hats. In the great words.
We've got hats. We've got hoodies. We've got
merch. We've got merch.
Watch it. See this, Corey. We're doing our hustle here on This Is Revolution.
I was looking at some of the merch. It's pretty nice.
Thank you.
Corey likes our merch. Corey likes our merch.
I'll tell you off air how funny it is that you said that about the person that designs it.
LME needs another This Is Revolution t-shirt.
There you go. So you go to the website, This Is Revolution, and on the site, you go down and bam! We got multiple designs of hoodie and shirt. I just got a new shirt myself for my girl. We got hats. The embroidery is actually with the hats.
I'm going to buy a hat.
It's hell of on point. I got this shirt right here.
That's the best one. That's the best hat. That's the best hat.
There's going to be some new stuff getting dropped. Design wise, I would say in the next few weeks. Originally, when we did this, we came up with probably like 8-9 designs, and there's definitely some cool stuff that when we came up with the original designs, we didn't have all the Pascal sayings, so we're gonna have to add the Pascal sayings in some of the designs.
What's Pascal's number one saying? Mau Mau.
One more time for people in the back. Mau Mau is just what he is. So tomorrow,
the Mau Mau Hour with Pascal Robert.
For patrons only, the Mau Mau Hour for Pascal Robert. Again, if you guys don't want to be patrons, but you want to watch it, you go to the Facebook. I'll have an invite up. Again, there'll be
Fatback and Biscuits is my saying. I should have it trademarked.
Should we do a Fatback and Biscuit shirt?
Yeah,
that's a good idea.
Yeah, Fatback and Biscuit shirt. Yeah, we need a Fatback. Well, we should. You know what we should do? We should do a Twitter poll to see which of Pascal's sayings should be put on the next T-shirt.
You know what? Like I would really like to do too is if we could have autographed copies of the books. So I actually did. I tried to buy the digital copy and I fucked up and bought the actual hard copy of your book, Corey.
Oh, that's cool.
So
someone said we should do a cartoon of Ta-Nehisi Coates and Ibrahim Kendi eating Fatback and Biscuits.
I don't know if you could walk around with that as a white person.
Jason is amused.
The picture in my head is of some very well-intentioned white person wearing that shirt and then just in the wrong space with it. What? Like, that's not a good idea because imagine that white person wearing that shirt, again, well-intentioned, and then crossing paths was like a hotep.
That wouldn't end well.
I can't have that on my conscience.
If Umar Johnson and his friends find
Umar Johnson sees Gene wearing a Fatback and Biscuits T-shirt with Ta-Nehisi Coates.
I am not wearing. Oh Jesus Christ, that sounds awful. Well, let's get to that's gonna be the Mau Mau right there. You're gonna get yourself Mau Mau with the "This is Revolution" swag.
You know what? You know how you know your show is over when Van Jones is just fucking shitting all over you because you had
Van Jones might be the subject of the Mau Mau Hour.
Oh yeah, Mau Mau Hour with Van Jones.
Yes, Paul can wear that.
Fatback and Flaky Biscuits.
Somebody say Paul wear that shirt. Yeah,
Van Jones with the Fatback and Flaky Biscuit.
That's like the meanest shit. Like, I think that shit would be funny, and I would hella do that, and then you start getting all these messages from people like, I had your shirt on. Some fucking guy called me a racist, and I had to explain to him that, no. I have black friends. I watch black people. I love the NBA.
Okay, let's get to the fun half, guys. Let's get to the after hours.
Okay, I love you guys, and we are out.